Welcome to On Point. I'm Leighton Levy, and of course, we have an interesting guest for you this week. The man who I'm about to talk to is a two-time world indoor champion, a two-time world champion, and of course, the 2004 Olympic champion, and one of the fastest men of all time. We're talking about Justin Gatlin. Justin, thanks for joining us here on Point. Amazing season, notwithstanding the fact that you didn't make it to the Olympic Games, but there are big stories surrounding whether or not you're retired or not. So let's start there. Are you retired?
Mr. Levy, glad to be back again. The thought has crossed my mind to be able to retire at this point in time. I haven't pulled the trigger if I'm going to do so or not. I got about maybe more than 15 days before fall training starts again. So I'm going to use that time wisely to consider what my next steps are going to be.
What are the factors that will determine whether or not you decide to retire or not?
Oh man, that's gonna entail what I'm gonna do in these next 15 days plus. What's the factors that's gonna go into it? Obviously, as an athlete, we think about our sport, and that's all we really think about as athletes. The future, what I'm gonna do afterwards, after retirement, how I'm gonna be able to benefit my family, but also how I'm gonna be able to touch all my supporters, the future, the young athletes as well. So I'm taking that all into consideration.
Okay, so you haven't decided on that yet. Next 2 weeks, we'll know for certain. But the last 10 and a half years, Justin, you've been among the most spectacular sprinters on the planet. 9.74, you've challenged Usain Bolt like nobody else has before. When you look back at the last 10 years, how would you characterize your return to the sport from 2010 coming forward?
I think that I wanted to push myself to a level that I never able to push myself before. Competing with Usain was one of my highlights of my career because, him being at the stage and the stature that he is, he brought the best out of me. And he was able to help me work to a level that I didn't even see my 9.7s was a goal of mine I was able to achieve.
So let's talk a little bit about Usain, because that was a major chapter in the track and field for a number of years, starting back in 2012 when you both met at the Olympic Games. What was that like for you, going up against a man who had run 9.58 in Berlin, 19.19, times that nobody had ever heard of before prior to that point? What was that like? Was it intimidating? Was it something that we saw what happened with Tyson Gay? He pushed himself to the limit until injuries took a hold. What was that like for you, especially coming back? And I remember your first season, you ran 10.09, which was nowhere close to where you were eventually. But what was that like for you, thinking about coming back against someone like Usain Bolt?
Amazing. I loved it. I'm a competitor at heart, so it's not an aspect of having fear because someone runs way faster than anybody else in history. I wanted to test myself. I wanted to see how I could match up against such a stellar athlete like himself. So it took me on that journey from 2012 all the way to this point in time where, even in his last race, going into 18, 19, he left a huge void, because every year I prepared for the world and then I prepared for Usain. That 1%. And I was used to doing so. So having him exit the sport in the way he did, he was definitely missed because he was that driving force. And I know his documentary said the same thing about me. But I wanted to be the challenge that he deserved. I wanted to step up to the plate and step to that line against him, regardless of time, regardless of 9.6s or 7s or 5s. And just go toe-to-toe and run line to line with someone like that. You're really able to test yourself when you go against a competitor like that.
And yet, of course, you finally, after several attempts, you finally beat him in 2017. And then you did something that was quite extraordinary, especially for an American athlete. You actually bowed to the man who many people consider to be the greatest sprinter of all time. What triggered that? Was that an organic moment where you just figured that was the right thing to do? What was the motivation behind doing that? Because personally, I was stunned.
It definitely wasn't planned. It was something that happened in the moment. And I know what it feels to be in the twilight of your career. I know what it feels like to wake up the next day and say, you know what, this might be my last race. I'm much older than he is as a person and as an athlete. I've been in sport longer than he has been in the sport. And when it was his last race, like I said, he pulled something out of me and made me work harder than I ever thought I was going to. So I felt like I needed to pay homage. It wasn't a Team America, USA thing. It wasn't Team Jamaica thing. It was an athlete who worked to be the best he could be for himself, and the world applauded him. And I wanted to give him his flowers before he left.
There's a time, though, when he didn't like you very much. He said as much in his documentary. He said that I don't know exactly what you said you did, but you made him angry. But when we saw from 2015, you sat down next to each other after the final, and you seemed to be having a really good conversation. And of course, in 2017, he jumped to your defense at the post-race press conference when the reporter asked an unfortunate question, I thought, about why the times were so slow comparatively to previous years. When did that relationship start to mellow, and how good is it now between you and Usain?
Well, I don't even know what the confusion is when it came to him not liking me, but I know that, when you're at the top and you're competing against the best and you have a rival, you tend not to like them too much. And sometimes you have to not like them to be able to fuel that fire that you have against them. And I think one thing that we have for each other is that respect. I know that when I compete against him, I'm going to bring my A game. And I think that he knew that as well. And I knew that when he came, I always envisioned that this was going to be a 9-5 Usain, regardless of what shape he was in, late season, early season, regular race, championship race, finals. I always envisioned that I'm going to run against a guy who's going to or capable of running 9-5. So I always had that respect for him. And like I said, it always brought the best out of me. I feel like sometimes I had to run for my life. And it set me up to be the best athlete I could be.
Well, we saw that in 2017 when, you copped everything. You beat Christian Coleman and Bolt to become world champion again, 12 years after you won it the first time. What was that like for you?
It was an eerie feeling of deja vu. Since the rise of Usain, obviously not a lot of people have had wins and successes, especially on the championship level. And for me, it felt like home. It felt like home. I worked very hard that season. I overcame injuries. I remember lining up and having lane 8 compared to his lane, 3, he was in, and not seeing him in that race at all or feeling him energy-wise in that race at all was strange because we're usually lined up shoulder to shoulder against each other through championships. So all I remembered is I just had to run my race. And I came through the line and I looked around and I was like, I got it. I did it, And like you said, the first thing I did was I paid homage to him because I know what it feels like to be a champion. And everyone thinks that it comes with roses and flowers and success and it's easy street. Being a champion is still pressure. And it comes with anxiousness and anxiety because everyone expects you to win. Everyone counts on you to win. And you're just human like anybody else. It's just that you are more talented sometimes and you're more prepared on that day. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I just wanted to make sure that he had his flowers before he left out from one of his top rivals. All
right. So let me ask you this. 2010, you come back to the sport after 4 years out. 10-0-9. When you're an athlete, and, I've lived the experience, not at the level where you guys have lived it, but you kind of wonder whether or not you'll be able to get back to where you were in terms of speed before. 10-0-9 in 2010 would not have given you perhaps a lot of confidence going forward. Did you have that fear about whether or not you'd be able to go as fast as you ran previously? 9.85 at the World Championships in 2005, a similar time in 2004, winning in Athens. Did you have that kind of concern?
Well, actually, my first race back was in a small town in Estonia, and I ran 10:24. So I was very, very far off from where I was used to being, and I was much, much overweight. I was like 210 pounds almost, and my usual normal running weight was like 183 running weight. So I was very far off. I knew that if I was able to focus and gain that discipline back, drop the weight, be with training partners that were going to be serious and push me to be the athlete I needed. So basically the tools needed to be a championship caliber athlete. And that's all I asked for. I didn't ask for it to be number one. I didn't ask for to be the champion again. I just said, I just want to be amongst the best once again. And that's what I worked hard towards.
Well, we saw the adjustments. I remember looking, because one of the things that I tried to do is to look at how sprinters adjust their mechanics that allows them to run faster. You gradually got faster over the years, and then I think it's about 2014 or 2015, I noticed you look a lot cleaner in your mechanics. Your start was better, your transition was almost perfect, and you're a lot more linear than before. Can you talk me through that process of how you got there? Because it obviously took a lot of work to retrain your body to do that.
I think that as athletes, we take, especially young athletes, we take for granted dieting and training. You know, we believe that training, we're burning calories, so I can eat whatever I want to eat. And my body will be ready for when I need to be ready, because I run and practice every day. But I really wanted to take serious my dieting and make it a lifestyle, my training and make it a lifestyle. In 2014, actually started in 2013 gradually, and then 2014, I made it more of a lifestyle where track and field basically consumed my life. And in 2015, I just reaped the benefits of it. And the fruit from it is because I was leaner, I was stronger, I became less fatigued, I didn't carry that much weight. And I studied my butt off, like when it came to my competitors, when it came to my own flaws and trying to be a better athlete. I just wanted to be able to be the best I could be. And that was the product of me working towards that in 2015.
Yeah, because we saw the times you had in 2015, I think you had a series of times that was unheard of. I mean, I think you peaked out at 9.74, I think it was, but you were flying in that year. You know, looking forward to the World Championships, of course, you had to be extremely confident. And in fact, you were made favorite that year to beat Usain Bolt. I know you've answered this question many times before, but take us back through that final, because that last 20 meters, Justin, you kind of gave it away.
Yeah. You know, that is, for all the athletes that's watching, regardless of where you're at in the world, that was a prime example of not dialing in and being focused on the moment. I was spectating the moment instead of trying to be in the moment. You can't be a part of history and make history and witness it at the same time. For me, it was lining up because everyone made me the favorite, thinking that it was going to be an easy win. You know what I mean? And lining up against somebody who is a championship caliber athlete and a showman who knows how to rise to the occasion. That was a hard and a tall order to handle. And I think that I went out there racing and I didn't compete. And that's what you saw.
What was that like, though? I mean, obviously you would have been disappointed losing that race, given the form that you came in with. Was it hard to accept that loss, given how great you were running leading up into the World Championships? Even in the semifinals, if you had run the time in the semifinals that you ran, I mean, the time that you ran in the semifinals, had you run that time in the finals, you'd have won street and lane.
Yeah, you're right. You know what? I think about that often, and nothing with no regrets, because life is always lessons, you know? And for me, it was a heavy blow, heavy blow, because I came across that line. I felt like Usain looked at me and was like, bro, what are you doing? Like, this was yours for the taking. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, like I said, life hands us lessons all the time. And for me, you know, it was heavy on me for going all the way through 16, even going into the Olympics and everything. 15 was heavy on me. And then injuring my foot, fracturing my ankle at the beginning of fall training at 16, I just couldn't get that 15 flare back that I had before. And I made my way through it. I muscled my way through it. But it was a lesson for me. And I was willing to step up to it. And then 2 years later, 17, I remember what I learned from 15. I said, run my race and finish the race.
Yeah, off the track though, Justin, it was probably just as difficult for you during that period, because you were made into the villain, to Bolt's hero. You were the foil to, you know, the celebrated Usain Bolt. That must have been difficult for you, but you didn't really show it on the track. You seemed to almost use it as and motivation to do even better. What was that like though? Because obviously it must have been tough for you and your family.
I had to, when people go through trauma, they kind of like compartmentalize, their personality and their feelings and emotions. And that's what left me there. Like being taken as the villain, and not having any way to justify me not being a villain. So I had to step to the occasion, like, all right, if I'm going to be this, I'm going to be this. And that's how I had to go out there and I had to run. At least I'm getting the attention. And this generation says, if you're getting attention, that's what you deserve. That's where you're at. A lot of people don't have the attention, but it made me, the trauma from articles and reading newspapers and people judging me on not even knowing me. It made me create a whole different personality. It made me become this figure on the track that had to protect my whole essence. And what I mean by that is, I think a lot of people in that situation would have just crumbled, would have just not even came back in the track and field for one, and would have never stepped up to the challenge, race against the fastest man in history two. So I had to be able to kind of block out all of that and build a persona that was ready for battle at any time and willing to sacrifice his body and himself to be able to love what he loves, which is track and field.
You studied psychology at University of Tennessee. Did that help in any way to help you? You just mentioned a very complex way of dealing with the disappointments and of course the image that you had out there. Did your study of psychology help you with any of that, any at all? Those measures
Absolutely.
that you just mentioned?
Absolutely. And my dad has a master's in psychology. So obviously him being a parent and my father figure and him able to talk and coach me through a lot of things. And, life is tough. It doesn't matter where you're at on the scale of life. If you're at the bottom, top, middle, life is going to be tough for all of us. And I just had to remember what I truly loved. I loved my family. I loved the field, track and field, the sport as a whole. I'm a fan of the sport. Even in Tokyo, watching Tokyo this year, I didn't have any kind of ill will towards not being there. I just wanted to see all these track and field runners make their dreams come true. So I had to learn to look at the big picture of things and realize that everything's not going to go the way you think it's going to go or going to be easy for you. So listening to my father and him explain that to me, I just wanted to make the best outcome possible for my life and my career.
Regardless of how strong we try to be in a lot of instances, there are moments that bring us to the close to the point of breaking. Was there a moment for you like that during that period when you were trying to deal with the public image and the negative things that were being said about you, regardless of the fact that you were trying your best to be an example for youngsters coming up, for representing your country, doing all the right things? Was there a moment where you felt like, this is getting a little bit too much for me?
Absolutely. I'm only one person. I'm human. So for me, it was the fact that I always looked at myself as not a hero, but a good person. You know what I mean? Someone that the next generation could look towards of getting advice from or look for inspiration. And I felt myself in this dark place. I felt myself helpless, hopeless. Sometimes at some points I felt useless, for the sport. And that's not where I wanted to be. And actually one of the saving graces was the young athletes. They never judged me. They never came to me and looked at me with a judgmental eye. They actually told me, all the things that I've been through in my life, in my career, and I still betted on myself. I still believed in who I was. I still went forward and tried to make the best of everything. I was commended in a way on that. And so the people that I inspired, they actually inspired me in turn too.
Talking about that, I mean, you've been competing so long that you actually started competing against some kids who probably emulated you way back when they were in high school, like Trayvon Bramwell, for example. Give me an example of what that experience was like for you. What kind of conversations did you have with these guys coming up, seeing the Justin Gatlin, who was the Olympic champion and the world champion, the fastest man in America, and at the time, the fastest man in the world? What were those conversations like with the youngsters coming up, like a Trayvon Bramwell and the others who were trying to be the next Justin Gatlin?
Listen, I have such a long list of athletes that not even that they were in college, they were still, when I won my first medal in 2004, Christian Coleman, I don't even think was even in grade school yet.
Yep.
And same thing with Trayvon Bramwell. He was maybe first grade at that point in time. And listening to them say, hey, I used to wake up to watch you on YouTube, watch your races and study your form. It gave me a sense of pride. But at the same time, I was like, all right, Justin, focus. These are your competitors now. Like, you got to treat them as competitors. As years passed throughout the sport, I found myself becoming more of a mentor, you know what I'm saying, and rooting for them to be the best athletes they can be while I'm still in the sport. But it's just a natural pecking order. And I always told any athlete and any reporter, the next generation is going to have to take it from me. I won't give it. I won't relinquish it without you guys stepping up to the plate and making sure, especially the USA athletes, making sure that USA is secure with a dominant sprinter or sprinters that's going to take over the torch and be the next great ones.
Yeah, so my next question actually works right into my next question, because you've come through from 2010, you climbed your way back to the top of the sport in 2017, beating all of these kids on the way, because I remember Trayvon fell, I think he fell in the final, I think it was, and or that was actually in 2015, sorry. But you climbed your way back to the very pinnacle. You became the world champion back in 2017 after 12 years. Why didn't you walk away after that, being that, you heard people like Michael Johnson say it's best to walk away when you're on top. Why not walk away in 2017? What kept you going?
Love. I love the sport, man. I love it. I love competing. I love going through the hard practices, even though they hurt so much.
Oh, yeah.
I love the fall training. I love the block starts at practice. I love pushing myself, and I love pushing other athletes that I train with. The love brought me back. That's really what it was. Like you said, I mean, I could have walked away from the sport at 17, being the champion, being on top. But I felt like I wanted to go a couple more years, man. I wanted to go a couple more years and celebrate with my fans and be in those stadiums. That feels like electric. Feels like electricity in those stadiums. I'm going to miss those once I do retire.
You broke down in tears at the U.S. trials because the opportunity to go back to one final Olympic Games eluded you because of that injury. 1087 in the final tells me that you weren't even close to being your best. How difficult was that for you? Because I think I remember seeing you break down in tears at a press conference. I think it was before the final or just after the final, about the possibility that you're not going to be back in Tokyo for one last hurrah at the Olympics. How emotional, how difficult was that for you to accept?
So for me, I want everybody to realize that it wasn't that I was emotional because I didn't make the team or I was injured. I was emotional because that morning I woke up and I realized that what always drove me, like so many other athletes, throughout my career, was making the Olympic team. And this was going to be my last opportunity, regardless if I make the team or not, that this was the last one. This was the last one. And I became emotional because this is what helped make me who I was. And I had to say goodbye. Yeah,
it was tough because I think, a lot of people wanted to see you, sort of in my circles, wanted to see you back in Tokyo to see, what would have happened there, because a lot of people don't realize this, but you're the last American man to win an Olympic 100-meter title back in 2004. It has been a while. How do you think that's going to change in 2020, 2024 in Paris? Or because, we thought, certainly I'm sure you thought, that America would have won in Tokyo with what we saw coming out of the US with Trayvon and, of course, what was it Bracy? I'm trying to remember.
It was Trayvon, Fred Curley, and Ronnie Baker.
Right.
To be part of the team, yes.
Yeah, but then an Italian comes out of the blue, for a former American, by the way, and wins it. Do you think America returns to that the top of that podium in less than 4 years going forward? And who are the likely people to do that, you think?
Well, I mean, we got to look back at history. History always repeats itself. And I didn't make my first team out. I was in 2003. I was sitting in the stadium in Paris, eating a baguette, watching the other World Championship USA team athletes run, win money, win medals, and it inspired me. I was there as a professional, but I didn't arrive yet. And the same thing with Usain. I raced against Usain in 2005, and he wasn't the Usain that we all know. So you have to have the opportunity not only to be fast and talented, but you have to realize that it's about experience, you know? And no matter how fast you run, that moment is so big when you're at that starting line for the Olympic finals and you're face to face with all your dreams, aspirations, goals. They're right there on the line with you. And then all of a sudden, the whole stadium gets quiet and you can hear a pin drop. You are face to face with your destiny. And I think that kind of like can swallow anybody. And I'm not saying that these guys succumb to that, but you realize that experience will always take over. And at the end of the day, going into 2024, I think experience will rise to the occasion. Again, I think these guys will have the opportunity the next couple of years to understand what championships really mean.
You just mentioned something that was quite interesting because I almost forgot about that. In 2005, there was a gangly little youngster from Jamaica running in the inside lane at the World Championships where the United States won first, second, third, and fourth at the World Championships in the 200 final.
Usain and he's Bolt, the biggest guy. He should have never been in that lane. The biggest guy.
Did you sense then that he would be the athlete that he eventually became?
Well, I mean, we all did. When you're in the sport, you know who the next could be. You know what I mean? It's all about them being dialed in, having the right coach, being focused. And like I said, when you saw me in 15, it was an aha moment for me. And so for Usain, 2007 was an aha moment for him. And he realized this is where I need to be. This is the regimen that I need to be able to be the best I could be. So it's going to take those aha moments for these young athletes to say, I can run 9.7 or 9.8 around the world. I can run these one-off races here, but when it's time to get on top of that podium and define your history, be a part of history and define your legacy, that's when your aha moments are going to kick in.
I have a couple of questions left for you, but I have to ask this one first. I hope you don't mind responding to this. You're in a camp with an extraordinarily talented young woman called Sha'Carri Richardson, who this year had several experiences that I think would have grounded her, preparing her for the next 4 years because you're 4 championships back to back to back to back. You know, having trained with her, what do you tell her now? You know, I'm sure you offer some kind of mentorship to her. You know, the experience that she had this year, how can she use that to be better going 2022, 2023, 2024, on ultimately 2025?
We've had a lot of talks, and she, regardless of what the world views her as, good or bad, she's one of my people. Love her. She is a spitfire. She is a breath of fresh air. She's young, and this sport is bringing in athletes younger and younger each year. You got to realize that when she came into sport, she was 19, 18 years old. You know what I mean? She was still a kid. And I always tell her that. So you're young. You haven't experienced anything. And then when her career, really her first year was during the pandemic, COVID. So she never really understood about traveling abroad or seeing the world or racing against people from other countries, racing against Jamaicans, you know what I mean? Who have such a big legacy that they've built for years. So I think for Sha'Carri is that she's so super talented. You can see the times that she can put out. I think her last frontier is making it all feel normal. And what I mean by that is understanding travel, understanding competing against high caliber athletes from around the world, and just the maturity of it. And she's getting it. Mm-hmm. She's realizing she can still be her, but as she becomes older and more seasoned, you know, athlete, that all come together and all set in, you know. some athletes, and I'm a competitor. And when I went through everything I went through, like we're talking about now, I ran a lot of times with a chip on my shoulder. And a lot of athletes run with chip on their shoulders. And she's one of those. But the world has to realize that we're still human. We still make mistakes. We still want to do things our way. We're still superstitious, So when you're watching us, we're not machines. We may run like machines and drop times like that would be machine-like. But at the end of the day, those pressures that we have on the starting line or the relief that when we come across the finish line is all there for us like any other person would be.
Did you have a conversation with her after Oregon, that last place finish when Elaine ran 10:54? And
Absolutely.
What did you say to her?
I told her that you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. It's all about how you bounce back. That's what it's all about. And my life and my career has defined that. It's all about how you bounce back. You're going to fall. Sometimes you're going to fall flat on your face. Sometimes you're going to feel embarrassed about certain things in races. But it's all about staying centered and believing in yourself and coming back and showing the world who you really are.
You said at the beginning of this chat that you'll probably decide in 2 weeks whether or not you'll retire or not. If you do decide to retire, what's next for Justin Gatlin? Is it coaching? Is it mentorship? Is it entrepreneurship? What do you think is going to be in the immediate future for one of the greatest sprinters of all time?
I would like to say all of that. Like I told you, I love the sport. I love these young athletes that are coming into the sport. I love to be able to give back, contribute my knowledge to the sport, try to help athletes watch out for pitfalls along the way, and allow them to express themselves. It makes me happy seeing athletes accomplish their dreams, even if I'm competing against them. So in some way, in some form, I hope that I can be able to stay in the sport and have some respect behind my name and be able to enjoy the sport from afar.
How do you think history will remember you, though?
I hope as a fighter, a competitor, someone who believes in himself and bet on himself and is able to accomplish that. Because in life, we all have that. You don't have to be a runner to realize that you're going to have pitfalls, you're going to have down times, and you got times where you're up. And it's always good to stay humble, believe in yourself, respect the ones that are around you, respect the craft, respect the other athletes that are learning the craft and competing against you. I'm a fan. I was a fan of Johan. I wanted to race Johan so many times, so much. I love watching him run. I compete against Asafa so many times throughout the years. We've had epic battles. Same thing with Usain, Michael Frater, Nestor Carter, all those guys. When you see the rise of these Jamaican athletes and where they've come from and where they're raised and what they achieved, you can't help but to respect that.
Well, Justin, thank you so much for taking time out for us on Point today. And of course, whatever you decide, we wish you all the best in that, because I think your legacy, I believe, and certainly from my perspective, will be one of the greatest sprinters of all time, who made the sport exciting for a decade against perhaps the greatest sprinter of all time. And we thank you for that. So wishing you all the best there, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody in Jamaica, too. Thank you very much in all the Caribbean. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it for On Point this week. Folks, until next week, this is Leighton Levy saying goodbye.